September 15, 2025. For Molly Qerim, it began like any other Monday. Another morning on the set of First Take, another day keeping the debates between Stephen A. Smith and the revolving door of analysts under control. She had done this for nearly a decade, balancing egos, controlling chaos, and guiding one of ESPN's flagship shows. What she didn't know was that this would be the last time she would ever sit in that moderator's chair. That very evening, the Sports Business Journal dropped a bombshell. Molly Qerim was leaving ESPN at the end of 2025 after contract negotiations had completely collapsed. For Molly, it was a devastating blindside. 10 years of her career, suddenly reduced to headlines and speculation. On Instagram, she admitted, "This wasn't how I wanted this news to come out." But the story didn't stop there. What was supposed to be a quiet farewell in December turned into something far more shocking. Within hours of the report, Molly made the decision to leave immediately. No farewell, no send-off, just an abrupt emergency exit. ESPN President Burke Magnus later admitted, "The one thing that was unexpected was the timing. Once her statement went out, it got out of our respective controls. This wasn't the kind of graceful goodbye ESPN was used to. This was sudden, chaotic, and deeply uncomfortable." And nobody understood that better than former ESPN host Marcellus Wiley, who described it as an emergency landing. Wiley posed the question that haunted fans and insiders alike: why did Molly walk out like this? The next morning, September 16th, Stephen A. Smith sat alone at the First Take desk, visibly shaken, breaking the news to viewers. Last night, Molly abruptly resigned as the host of the show. To say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement. Molly is a friend. Molly is a coworker. She's someone I've leaned on many times as she has leaned on me. We've been partners on this show for 10 years. And sometimes these things happen and it's just uncomfortable to see. It sounded heartfelt. But then came the moment that raised eyebrows everywhere. Stephen A. told viewers, "The details, quite frankly, are none of your business." But it was a contract negotiation that was going on. Think about that. In the same breath, he insisted the details were private, then immediately began leaking details. It was confusing, contradictory, and it set off alarms across the sports media world. And then people noticed something even more glaring. In Molly's farewell message, she thanked the fans. She thanked the show. But she never once mentioned Stephen A. Smith. Not even in passing. After 10 years of building one of the most successful sports shows in history side by side, she couldn't bring herself to type his name. Insiders immediately read between the lines. That wasn't an oversight. That was deliberate. That omission spoke louder than any statement she could have made. Behind the scenes, Molly's exit wasn't just about money. It was about power, respect, and betrayal. Reports soon revealed she had been making around $500,000 a year for hosting First Take. A decent paycheck for most, but insulting when compared to Stephen A. Smith, who was pulling in over $20 million annually, 40 times her salary. 40. And while Molly asked not just for fair pay but for a path forward, a show of her own, expanded opportunities like Max Kellerman once had, ESPN essentially slammed the door shut. Their answer was clear: stay where you are for what we're offering or leave. Meanwhile, reports emerged that Fox Sports had offered Molly a deal worth $2 million a year. 4 times her ESPN salary. She took that offer seriously. And she asked ESPN to match it. Instead, they chose to let her walk. But here's where the betrayal cuts the deepest. Stephen A. Smith wasn't just Molly's co-host. He was also the executive producer of First Take. He had real influence over personnel and budget decisions. When Stephen A. signs off on someone, insiders say they get taken care of. When he doesn't, they don't. That power dynamic explained a lot. Stephen A. had been aggressive, unapologetic, even ruthless in his own contract negotiations. In 2024, he publicly demanded $25 million per year. He compared himself to NFL quarterbacks, went on podcasts, and made his contract talks a circus. He even accused critics of trying to sabotage his deal. Eventually, he landed a $100+ million contract with ESPN and a $36 million deal with SiriusXM. But when Molly Qerim pushed for her worth, Stephen A. suddenly turned into a preacher about humility. On his podcast, just days after Molly's departure, he lectured about people forgetting their place and warned, "Everybody answers to somebody." The hypocrisy was staggering. This was the same man who once lost his job at ESPN in 2009 for overvaluing himself in negotiations, later admitting his ego got in the way. Yet here he was, framing Molly's decision to demand better as arrogance. Even Emmanuel Acho called him out, saying on his own show, "Molly was your sidekick for 10 years. Protect her at all costs. Don't get clicks at the cost of Molly." And that's the point. Stephen A. built his empire by making his contract talks content, by publicly demanding more money, by refusing to settle for less. Yet when Molly tried to do the same, he painted her as ungrateful, as overreaching, as someone who had forgotten her place. Marcellus Wiley put it best: Molly didn't leave quietly. She left with a statement. Walking out overnight forced Stephen A. to sit alone at the desk, highlighting just how much she brought to First Take. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. And that's why this story isn't just about one woman leaving ESPN. It's about the ugly power dynamics inside sports media. It's about how loyalty can vanish when money and influence are on the line. And it's about Stephen A. Smith's hypocrisy, preaching humility to others while practicing ego-driven negotiations himself. Molly Qerim may have walked away from First Take, but she walked away with her dignity intact. And the silence in her farewell, her refusal to thank Stephen A. Smith, may be the loudest statement of all.